Jon Henshaw is here. He is the founder of Coywolf and the Senior Director of SEO at Vimeo. He is an industry veteran with over 25 years of digital marketing and web technologies experience. And before founding Coywolf, a software and publishing company focused on modern web technologies and online marketing, he co-founded Raven Tools, a popular digital marketing SaaS company. He recently sold Raven Tools in 2017, and he's worked with numerous Fortune 500 companies throughout his career, including Paramount Global, where he was the director of SEO for their Paramount Plus, SHOWTIME, and Pluto TV streaming services. And he's currently the senior director of technical SEO at Vimeo, an all-in video platform and businesses and creators. So thanks again for joining us today, Jon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to kick it off with a topic around your Coywolf project. So when you launched Coywolf, you spent a lot of time and energy on making Coywolf fast, and it's pretty fast. But like, how important do you think site speed is in regards to SEO?
I think that I'll throw around a bunch of terms that people might debate, but the less authoritative the younger a site is, less trustworthy that site might be to Google, the more important performance is. But once you start getting into the domains and the brands that are going to be in demand regardless, that people are just going to do direct traffic to, that type of thing, it's probably less important. My general sort of approach is, even so, even if you are on the latter side, the one where you know what, we're awesome, we've been around, we get tons of traffic, everybody wants us for some reason. If you have competitors and those competitors are kind of in a similar boat, then performance could be a deciding factor. So it's just one of those things where if you have poor UX and the page performance is pretty low, and your competitor has made pretty good inroads on that, that might be the factor that gets them to rank before you do. So that's sort of how I approach it.
Awesome. Makes a lot of sense. And kind of jumping over to a recent tweet, I think it's for your wife's site, the Perfect Palette Design website. You mentioned you were able to rank for #1 on desktop and mobile above the map pack on both, all without link building or a Google My Business page, and even no ads. Can you walk us through that strategy and your thought process for that site?
Yeah, so I mean, another way to say it is I achieved the impossible. Which is, how can you do that? That's not what everything, that doesn't fit everything that's ever been written by everybody or is taught. And so it takes, #1, it takes time. It's not like that happened overnight. So I will say that almost everything that we'll probably talk about today that goes against convention is not it happens, super fast. Like, if you just do the things I'm saying, it's going to beat out all these older techniques. But what it does do is it beats them out over time. And that's what I've seen when we talk about maybe some of the stuff I've done on Coywolf and stuff. All of these things so far have beat out everybody else's techniques to try to get things to rank over time. It just builds and builds and builds and builds, and then one day it's just right there. And I know we were talking kind of earlier. Like I said, I'll mention some examples on Coywolf with that. But with my wife's site, it's just all about doing things, in my mind, correctly. And so it has to do with only use what you need to be able to communicate the information that needs to be communicated. For what she's doing, for the people on this webinar, she's a color consultant. And she's a color consultant, and she only works within a certain area of the Nashville metro area. And so that's kind of what you need to know. And so you can go look at what are the things that are related to color consulting, and when you search for stuff, what is it that Google's returning, that type of thing. And you start to gather a pretty good idea of how Google sees that particular field. And then that should direct your copy. That should direct the text, what you write on that page. And so you don't need a giant site. Even one of the things I left out in that tweet was, and there's no blog posts. Like all these things I've been actually trying to get my wife to do, but she doesn't want to, and she has enough business. But there's no blog posts. There's no anything. It's just a single page site. And so I rolled with that. And so I just created a really simple page. I didn't pull in libraries and all kinds of crazy stuff and React and whatever. I just made a simple static HTML page. And then I paid very close attention to how every little piece of that was coded, so that it was not as much validating HTML, but semantic HTML, making sure that the way I put sections together is semantic. There's meaning behind it, that the HTML elements I use are address, they're the things that are actually semantic, that mean what this piece of code is. And then I did things where I went out of my way for images for the device. So I use something called source set, which is I literally display a completely different image if you're on a mobile device. It's the same, it comes from the same desktop image, but the layout's slightly different. It's a little smaller, and it's literally a square instead of a rectangle. So I even deliver different things. So I took every best practice that I have learned about, tested, whatever, and applied it to this page, and fully. And then the last part I would drive home with this page is it has the greatest schema structured data that's, I swear, has ever been created, I've ever seen. And it's got Dave who specializes in it actually helped me with it. And I even experimented a little bit with it. I even added like geo location stuff where I even put in the structured data that this business only serves this area. And when I did that, even though everybody says it doesn't work, it worked. Like I literally, when I did that, within a week, it improved her performance and search results locally. So I just did like all the things. I did all the things. I did them right. And just paid ridiculous amounts of attention to how every little piece was done, and took out anything that was unnecessary. And I would say over the past, maybe it's been up 2-3 years, maybe now, I've just watched it grow and grow and grow and grow. And I just happened to check randomly the other day, and I was like, oh, this is number one for mobile and desktop now. And I have done nothing with it, meaning beyond just everything I just described. I have not set up a Google business profile for it because my wife doesn't want me to. I generally don't do any link building anyways, which is a conversation we can get into. I definitely have in the past, but not in a while. So zero link building, zero anything that everybody would say you're supposed to be doing. I've done none of. I've only just done technical best practices with the site, and it has is ultimately won over time.
And why do you think that is? Like everybody always talks about sending authoritative signals, whether if they're inbound or outbound, and kind of building more content on the page. Like, why do you think focusing on exactly like what Google wants and then structured data outperformed other kind of like best practices?
So I think that in SEO, there isn't necessarily a single right way to do something. And I equate it to my educational background, which is in counseling psychology, which is there are many different theories and approaches to helping people with their mental health. And those theories can be very different from each other, very disparate, but they can both be effective for the same problem. So in other words, just because I might be a cognitive behavioral therapist doesn't mean that somebody else's approach couldn't help that person achieve the same goal. And I think the same is true with SEO. I think that because people need something that they can do actionable now and get, as quickly quick results as possible. And they need to think they understand how everything works. The industry gravitates towards what's this tangible thing I can do. Obviously, okay, it makes sense that if I build links, I do this, and it all goes back into the beginning of SEO time and PageRank and how it all works. And so I think that the industry to this day continues to obsess on that. That's something that agencies can understand, and they can sell, and they can replicate. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying, but I don't think it's necessary to achieve the same goal. And so with that being said, my approach, my in general non-link building approach, is to be heavy on technical, because from my experience over the years, and especially from the lots of experimentation I've done with Coywolf and different sites and different pieces of content, I am convinced that a technical approach to SEO, not necessarily a PR, a communicative type of thing, but a technical approach to SEO is just as, if not more effective, to achieve that same goal. And I would say the only difference, and I think I kind of already mentioned this, the only difference that I've seen as far as getting to that goal is time. My approach takes more time, but it seems to win and stick longer than just again, using link building as an example, longer than a link building campaign, which a lot of times has to be sustained. A lot of times gets really mucky, has there are a lot of reasons why I don't like link building, because it can damage your brand. It can make you look bad. It can be done poorly, especially when it's outsourced. So anyways, I think that, where I, as a counselor, might approach therapy through a cognitive behavioral approach, I think a almost completely technical SEO approach, and that includes how you write the copy and the focus on entities and things like that, is absolutely a winning strategy.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a cool case study. But you've mentioned it multiple times. Let's go ahead and jump into your kind of beliefs around link building. And kind of like what backs that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to learn about that too. What do you think links actually do in the algorithm?
So I think that the algorithm itself is fairly complex, and it is a sort of an equation, a sum of signals. And so there are different combinations of signals and things that you can do to achieve a similar goal. And so the reason why, even though I don't lean on link building, I don't think it's defunct. I mean, I still think it's actually a valid approach, is because that is one of the type of signals that you can use in order to get something to have better visibility and ranking. I think that, I mean, most of my thoughts around it are pretty similar to the general thinking, which is, if you get the right site on the right page, meaning like the right content, perhaps even written by a particular author, that is appropriately referencing the thing that you do, and of course giving you that link, I think that is a very strong signal to Google of relevance and trust. And so that's great. I mean, that's like, do that. The way I do that is, personally, is I use news. So in other words, like, I do I call it zero effort link building, which is like, I'm not going to do anything. And it probably comes closer to, what Google considers to be natural, because it is natural. And that is something I've found through my experimentation with Coywolf, is I was able to get coywolf.news into Google News. So anytime I publish an article, on Coywolf News, it's in Google News. If you go to news.google.com or whatever, I mean, like, and you search for whatever it is I did, it's there. If you were to read, I mean, if you were to search for, I think the most recent thing I wrote was Instagram alternative, and I was talking about pixel fed. So if you were to search for like Instagram alternative or Instagram pixel fed, I'll probably be first. I haven't checked today or whatever, but I wrote that recently. What's really powerful about being a part of Google News is you are assumed a trusted source to other journalists. And I mean, like I would hope that the stuff I write and what comes from that would be that way. But I'm just saying in general, anything that shows up in that area is also the place where other journalists search. So journalists, when they're writing something, they'll always do Google searches, and they might find, your content, they might reference you and stuff. But what I have found is I get my content mentioned and referenced, quoted, and linked to more often because I show up in Google News. And so other journalists automatically assume that I'm a trustworthy source. So that's my zero effort link building is whenever, I write articles, I put them on Google News. I mean, I put them on coywolf.news. They show up in Google News. And a lot of times I'm like, oh, that's cool. I just discovered these, different articles are linking to me. I've had TechCrunch link to me, I think more than once, and several other like major tech sites and stuff. And that, of course, is a strong signal, which it just reinforces my site and it performs even better over time.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, and kind of on that note, I think we can move over to the TLD experiment that you're currently running on Coywolf. So if no one's
one that makes no sense to anybody, but
yeah. So with Coywolf, you kind of mentioned it a couple years ago at your Engage conference, but you've kind of doubled down on that experiment.
I have
past time, and so right now Jon has coywolf.com, and then he's got .pro, .email, .news, .reviews, .blog, and even more. I think you even have like .llc.
I have way more. Yeah, I have way more. Yeah.
But kind of like, why do you want to structure it that way? And then like, how is it going? And then also kind of how is it comparing to, say, put it on a subdomain or put it in a folder like what normal sites would do?
Normal people do. Yeah. So boy, there are several reasons why I did it. One is just the great experiment of all. I just like, I wonder what will happen if I do all this. And I make all these different properties look similar, and I even build a network out of them. So like if you go to, I do own the .com. So if you go to coywolf.com, you'll see the contact manager, pro, news, reviews, and they're all different domains. But it all kind of feels like one site. You click on it, you actually go to a different domain, but you feel like you're in the same place. So I wanted to see if I did that, how Google would treat those properties and whether or not it would, associate them. I wanted to do it also because I assumed and was correct that if you use multiple domains, you can fill up the search page, the search results page, with more of you. and so if that's why, if you were to do, I don't know, maybe a search for like Coywolf SEO or something like that, you're probably going to see all these different domains from my site. Usually when I say that, the immediate response from a lot of people is like, so you're spamming? And I'm like, no, I'm not spamming. Like and here's why. I am also very, very big on this idea of disambiguation. I use the term a lot, and it's because that, to me, is a core component of effective SEO, is disambiguating the content and what it is you're trying to communicate to the algorithm. And so each of those sites is specific, very specific to what it does. The Coywolf.reviews, I bet you can guess it, only does reviews. and Coywolf.news only does news. And Coywolf.pro is only for, like, it's just, content for professionals. It's just stuff for, it's higher, it's more complicated, it's more in depth. And so Coywolf.email is only for newsletters, so it only has newsletter content I put in there. And so that on a domain level is disambiguating the content. It's absolutely telling Google that like this individual property is a review site, and the only content I put on there are reviews of, whatever technology software. And so to me, that is not spammy. That is actually almost ideal for the way you communicate content to Google. And it has worked really well for me. Like shockingly, as in I'm still in shock that some of the things are working because I did not predict that they would. And so an example would be Coywolf.reviews is like the perfect example of, okay, that does work, type of thing, which is most of my articles, particularly if they relate to me as an author and sort of what I generally write about elsewhere, rank first. So if you were to search for something like Little Warden review or Fathom Analytics review, they're almost always first at the very top, or their featured snippet. But there are other things that I don't think to this day I should show it for, but I'm not complaining. I'm not going to tell Google not to do this. So for example, Level Bolt is a review that I did. If you search for Level space Bolt, I'm like, I don't know, I rank third or fourth. I keep going back and forth between Tom's Hardware on that one, just for like the name. And it's funny even because if you do Level Bolt review, I'm a little further down, at least last time I checked. I am beating out like huge sites, and I don't think I should be. I mean, like I'm surprised at it. I mean, I think that the quality of what I've written and I've published and the way that I put together, kind of similar to that perfect palette .design, site we're talking about earlier, is extremely high. I mean, to me, it's like I've given it my all. I've done my best. I've tried to be as good as that can get with it. And so, I don't think that all the things we talked about explain why that would show up there. And so, but I think I know the reason why, like as of maybe the last several months. I think I figured it out, and it's something I haven't talked about yet. And that is, it's not enough to do a link building campaign, and it's not enough to kind of code and build your site just like, technically perfect, or to just really have the type of, say, review that Google says you need to have, because they have this whole new documentation out there that just says, here's literally the guideline to how to write your reviews for us to think they're high quality. I think it has to do with engagement. I think that all of my Coywolf sites, content-based sites, have extremely high bounce rates. I mean, we're talking like 80-90%. And traditionally, when we look at something like that, we're like, boy, that's an awful site. Like you have a horrible bounce rate. Like, oh, you're surviving as a site. Well, it ends up that my time on site is in the 2 minutes. And so for those listening, bounce just means they're not going past that first page. That's all that means. It just means they're not going past the first page, and they're likely, clicking back. That ends up not being a bad thing to Google if it's for a certain amount of time, because Google knows that we're all researchers. We're all looking for information. And so the theory or assumption is that if I Google something, and let's say they click on one of my results and they go to that page, and if they stay there for a minute or longer before going back, that's actually a signal. I think, again, I'm speaking in theory here, but that's a signal of relevance. And so I think that because I've done all the other signals over here, the way I approach SEO and the way I've been approaching my, how I experiment with Coywolf, it's that plus engagement, the time on site, that has elevated these things that otherwise would have never shown up, and wouldn't have ever been able to compete with, the big sites.
It's very interesting. So you think you're kind of like building authority on the reviews TLD about review content, regardless of actually what review you're reviewing, and that's kind of like a big driver of it, of the success.
I think it's because the user experience is very good on anything that I publish, because on the review site, we're talking like only 8 or 9 reviews, maybe at the most. I mean, it's a tiny site. It's not that old either. And I think that the association with me as an entity, as an author, the association with a trusted brand org, Coywolf, the high performance of the page, the fact that, going back to user experience, the fact that when you go to that page, there's not a bunch of there are 0 ads. I have no advertising. You just go in, and it 100% respects the user and gets straight to the point of what it was they were searching for. It absolutely matches what they were trying to find and read. So it's a very respectful experience to the visitor. And the way it's written is I mean, I was writing this way before Google had their guidelines, but they're very consistent with their guidelines. You know, it's just like, hey, I only review things that I've used, that I like, that I, would even recommend. And I'm giving you my personal experience. And so I think it sucks sort of the user in, keeps them there, and they want to read it. They want to see what I have to say and stay on there, read it for a good minute or 3. And then they may bounce back to Google, but that when they do that, I believe that it sends a strong engagement signal to them. And so Google wants to return things in the results, regardless of whether you're a giant site or not, that they think will be the type of things that a searcher would want to, experience.
I like that, yeah. And maybe next you can do coywolf.recipes.
I'm sure I have that domain registered. I have a lot of them registered.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, that's one of 1,000 things on my list I'd love to do in my spare time. Yeah.
Yeah, and since you mentioned it, I would like to dig into more of your disambiguation, kind of like why you think it's important and how it kind of changes how you approach SEO.
Yeah. So Google is analyzing millions, some cases billions, but millions of pages, and they're trying to figure out of all those pages, what do I think it wants to be the most confident about to match a particular query. It wants to be confident about the intent and the topic. And so the more stuff that we put on a page, the more it dilutes it, the more it ambiguates from what it is that Google's trying to achieve. And so that's why I am very big in disambiguation. And I'm trying to remember some of the things. I have an article on coywolf.pro about this, but it's one of those things where the way you should approach it is don't have a bunch of other things on your site. Like I said, just don't try to be promoting something that's unrelated. Don't have a bunch of things. Just have that page focus on that particular thing that you're trying to rank for. And then when you write that content, this might even be kind of similar to kind of what I think maybe ClearScript does, which is making sure that that copy, that content references, I guess I'll just use the word similes, simile phrases. Just making sure that the content itself absolutely is about this particular thing, which generally means that that when you write about something, you try to use keywords and phrases that sort of mean the same thing as a way to disambiguate. Because as they analyze that content, they're like, you said this, but you also said that, and you said that, and we actually know those to all sort of be the same thing. Then that's going to help it rank better. You can see this when you do a Google search now, where as a business or something, you might be like, well, this is what we call it, and this is what we assume everybody searches for, and you go search with that phrase. Well, Google returns something completely different on the whole page. They're actually targeting a completely different phrase, and you're way off on just because you call it that as a business, or you think that the industry refers to it as that. That's not how Google sees it. Google sees it as this thing, and that is your very strong clue that use that word instead as your main stuff, and then but still include the other stuff, and still include the term you thought it should be in your copy, and that helps disambiguate, and it also helps you rank for that term even better. So there's that. Trying to think of some other things that may have just kind of left my brain. Entities. That was another piece, which is I've had really good success with getting content to rank well by going out of my way to mention companies and people and things and events and places that I normally wouldn't have included in my copy. And the reason why is because, again, it's the disambiguation factor. It's like, okay, you've used all these similes. I know it's about this. And if you're talking about software or something like that, you've mentioned this similar software or these similar companies, it further disambiguates that content to Google. So it's all a game of creating the most confidence with Google and your content over any other alternative. So they're like, I'm going to return, its algorithm, if it was a living thinking thing, would be like, I'm going to return this because I know for a fact, beyond, shadow of doubt type of thing, that this is about this. And I think that will serve our searchers better than this other content that is from a trustworthy source, but I'm still not completely sure that it's about this thing.
Nice. And we do have a question from the audience. It says, for a business that's just starting out, what do you feel is the right way to find your ideal buyer persona, and how can they find and target them organically?
Yeah, so I like that question. The best way to figure out your buyer persona is to pretend you're the buyer. I mean, it's, there's many different ways to approach this. That it's literally talk to people who have already been customers. It's talk to people who are patrons of competitors. It's doing surveys. It's whatever. There's many ways to find that out. But I would have to assume that the founder or the person who has a lot of experience in that business has a good idea of the problem they're solving, and so if they do, then they just need to go to Google. I mean, Google search is like the greatest tool, believe it or not, and it's free, and essentially just pretend you're a Yahoo who is interested in, who has this problem that your company solves, and just what are all the ways that you, blank slate, would try to find it on Google search. You should be doing that. You should probably be getting other people to do that, who you're just like, you give them the scenario, which is you need this thing. Just, you need to solve this problem, or you need this solution. I'm going to watch you search for it. I mean, so that on top of your own, you'd want to do that because you can have your own existing biases. So you may have a blind spot. So that, along with having other people do those things, and then you just studying what gets returned in the search results, is going to give you a huge amount of data. I would say probably much more than trying to get keyword stuff from other keyword tools or whatever. I mean, those can be helpful, but you're going to learn the most there. It's just like the scenario I gave a little earlier, where you think it's this one term, and so you think you should be targeting this stuff, but when you just do a simple Google search, that's not what Google's returning. Like, they understand what that is, but they think it's this. And so you need to, so that's an immediate educational experience to be like, okay, I need to be writing about this. I need to be like including this phrase as my primary phrase, and then the thing I thought was primary should probably be secondary. So anyways, that's how I'd approach it, is just be a user, be a searcher, try to solve your problem blindly, and see what comes back, and then study what those results are and how you think Google might be thinking about that particular thing, and then look at the content, click on all those links, go look at what these people are writing about and who the competitors are and how they're approaching it. And that'll give you a ton of insight into sort of what a buyer is looking for and thinking, and what you should be actually creating and writing.
Definitely agree. And then kind of jumping back to what we had previously discussed, back to your news site, you wrote an article about some of the takeaways from doing this news site, but do you think more websites should adopt it? And then kind of elaborate on some of the takeaways that you've learned by launching one.
I think that when I got into Google News, it was probably like a month before they stopped the whole process of being accepted, and they just went to pure, algorithmic approach. And so there's good and bad to that. I think that for companies who are like, I want to take advantage of that if I could, type of thing, or brands or whatever, I think that the approach should be less about trying to get into Google News, and instead trying to create your content in a way, present your content in a way that is similar to the signals expected from Google News. What I mean by that is a lot of things about Google News that they look for are trust signals. Trust signals, and that you're really trying to tell them a story. You're trying to, it's not about you selling yourself. It's about, give me the content. And so if you look at a lot of news sites out there, if not most, if not all, there is a similar structure that most of them have adopted, and it's because it works. It's because more often than not, they're going to be in top stories. They can compete in that top stories carousel, and more often than not, it's going to rank organically better. And so one thing is, don't just do a headline and barely mention your author and and then the rest of the page is just filled up with a giant image or something like that, and all your content's below the fold. Google News wants as much content as possible above the fold. They want to see as much as possible. And we know that when you add a synopsis or a list of what you're going to learn in the article at the very top underneath the headline, that those perform better. That's just like something that is generally known in with sort of news SEO crowd now. And there's no reason why you can't do that on a blog. There's no reason why you can't do that in just like general articles that you write. And in more cases than not, I have found in my experimentation that content performs better, because Google in general, the algorithm, not just Google News, wants to see more information at the top. They want to know that you are giving the user, the visitor, as much useful information versus forcing them to scroll and forcing them to interact. They prefer to have that before. It also helps them understand it better. I think that the content that shows above the fold is probably weighted a lot heavier than what shows up below the fold. So you should be putting in as much as you can about that content. So you will see on pretty much all the articles I write on all of my sites, it's headline, it's synopsis, and then it is a good the author. I try to always have a social profile link, because I think that's a signal of trust, and also disambiguates me as an author. It's like, this is me. I link to either my author page or to my site, and this is also definitely my Twitter account. And yes, I'm the same. I'm this person, and everything you know about me with this Twitter account, and because they know a lot about Google cares and knows a lot about Twitter and what gets posted there, and everything you know about me as an author and my site and whatever, you're connecting all of these things, the graph, and it helps them understand like who you are, what this content is. Are you probably somebody who knows about this content, should be writing about it, and should I be returning this when somebody searches for it? So the EAT it's more of a concept. It's not really a thing. It's just more of a concept. But I do believe, based on just observation, that there, as an entity of an author, that what it is you write the most about and you're known about by them will likely perform better than the stuff that it thinks is unrelated to you. And I would say almost more often than not, the things I write about that I've written about a lot before, especially, of course, related to SEO, seem to perform faster and better than anything else.
Very interesting. And then kind of one of the news articles you wrote, I can't remember when it was, maybe last year, year before. But there's a lot of talk, and there's more talk kind of popping up about Apple launching their own search engine. Like, granted, they already have some searchability. But what are your
I rank well
thoughts
for
on
that too, and there's a reason for that. I mean,
Yeah,
that was intentional. But
yes. What are your thoughts on kind of like non-Google search engines with Apple's possible release, and then you have Ahrefs with Yep, and of course all the other existing search engines out there right now?
So there's a lot of haters of Google, especially within the own SEO practice. A lot of people who complain about, these are trash results, or, or whatever. And it's a constant type thing. I don't fall into that camp. I'm not an apologist for Google. But I do think that they're the best search engine. I still think to this day, as a whole, they present the best results. I've tried to, as personal tests, as whatever, try to use other search engines, and I don't like them. I always come back to Google because I, as just a user off the street, think it's a better experience. So that I just want to kind of start off with. As far as I'm going to talk about Apple search, and I'm going to talk about just all these smaller, competing search engines trying to, take market share. Apple's search engine already exists. It is Spotlight, and it's just integrated into everything they do. So I doubt we'll ever see search.apple.com or whatever. It's just part of the operating system. They built it into their apps. But at this point, if you were to search for a score, type in a team, a NFL team, while the game's going on your phone or in Spotlight, it's just going to pop it up. It's going to have the score right there. And they have a deal with the NFL. And if you tap on it or click on it, it's going to give you more details about it. It's very Google-like, and you don't even go to Safari. You're just in your operating system. You're using the Spotlight app. So that already exists. That's like, it's like not even a topic anymore. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just like, it exists, what it is, they've done it, that's their thing. They're going to continue to sort of just scrape away and take more market share away from Google and publishers by integrating it into the OS experience. Now, with other sites, because I spent time with Neva. I've interviewed and used and talked with other, sort of smaller search engines. From their perspective, if they could just get a tiny percentage away from Google, they feel like they're going to be successful. They're like, oh, it's like, if I just get this, I'm going to have a ton of money. And it's probably true, as far as like that, their size. And so I think that we're seeing a lot of activity, and have been for a while around there, because of this belief that surely Google can't go on forever, or at some point, the legal system of governments, whatever, are going to crack down on them, and it'll somehow make it more fair or something like that. And then with that, surely I can make a slight, I can make an experience that if I could just get 0.5% of searchers out there, I'm making a lot of money, and I'm doing great. So I think that's sort of where a lot of them are coming from. But it's really hard to do search. It's really hard to get it right. And it's extremely difficult on top of that to do it in a way that continues to respect the user while trying to not go out of business. And so that's why Neva is pretty cool. I like what Neva's doing. I'm a part of their whatever early network people. Like, I have a lifetime access to it because I did a lot with it in the beginning. I think they got into a lot of it's not just them, there's other smaller search engines got into like Web3 crypto stuff, which I am not a fan of. And so that sort of turned me off. I think if they hadn't have gone that route, I would probably still be playing around with Neva or pushing it. Maybe I will again. I'll get back to that. But I think that's sort of the scrappiness, like people trying to find what's this advantage, what's this thing that we can do where we can take away from Google. But at the end of the day, I just think Google's the best, and people can hate me for saying that. And they probably will, and they'll say it. But I like Google. I like Google. I like the way all of their mini teams approach the search experiences. I think they're very smart, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. If anything, I've been watching, I think Cloudflare has these stats now that sort of like search engine referral share or whatever. Google's still climbing. I mean, it's like unbelievable to me, but globally, they just keep inching up. I mean, it's just really amazing. It's kind of like when Chrome came into the picture. Yeah, you just kind of watch it, and then eventually that's a whole other Google topic.
Yeah.
And so I don't think if I were, this will probably upset somebody somewhere, if I were going to invest in things, it would not be a competing search engine. I'm still bullish on Google dominating. I think they have the best results.
Yeah. I know we have like 10 minutes left, but definitely want to get your thoughts on kind of AI generated content. Like, what do you think about it? Where do you think the future is in that, and kind of like future uses out of the box?
Well, AI in general is a whole philosophical box to open. I mean, as far as just, I was watching or listened to the Seth Rogen, Steve Jobs, podcast. I'm like, oh no, like if this is just the beginning of our future, we're screwed. so there's a lot to be concerned about with AI. I think that it's inevitable that AI copywriting will become a thing and will likely become indistinguishable from human writers, as far as passing the test of, hey human, read this, do you think it's a robot, or written by another human, and we're probably going to get to the point probably sooner than later they're going to be like, I think that's a human. Okay.
Yeah.
That seemed really logical. It made a lot of sense. So I think at the end of the day, what matters is, are you getting your question answered, and is it correct? If AI writing, I guess, can achieve that, sure, but I don't know. I think it's helpful now to help writers, just like Grammarly is helpful to help writers. I think that AI has a good, healthy, practical use as sort of a digital assistant to help people write better and find things that it's hard to find when you've written 2,000 words, or be able to go do the research and bring back things that could be included in your content. But I'm still old school enough to say that at the end of the day, the best way to write content is to have a human writer do it, and if you're lucky enough and have the resources to have a human editor help you, make it the best. I can't imagine a scenario in my lifetime where I would think different from that, because Grammarly, as good as it is, still makes mistakes, but it's great. But it still takes my brain to make sure that I don't allow it to be like, no, that's not what I meant to say. Don't give me that suggestion. But I do think that it's going to get messy. I think that we'll be able to say that some AI created content, meaning like the content that's 100% created by some sort of, software, could be useful and could be helpful. But like all things, it will be abused and every opportunist will take advantage of it, and it's going to be a giant mess. And I have to hope and assume and trust that the companies like Google are trying to address it, are already.
Definitely.
I believe they are. I know companies are doing their best to detect AI written content, but it's just like spam brain and fighting spam and whatever. It'll be probably an endless battle.
Yeah.
So,
Because
but I think I don't think
at
that.
the other side.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think that AI content, like 100% AI written content, should necessarily be penalized or devalued if it ultimately is correct and factual and helps answer the question of that. So I'm not like 100% against AI, whatever. I mean, like I just, it's more of just the general fear of knowing it will absolutely be abused and will likely muddy up search results and sites as people try to sort of cheat their way up.
Yeah, even more so than already now.
Yes.
And then I think it's time for a couple more questions, but what are your thoughts on video search, and should more businesses devote more resources to kind of video production?
Well, you know where I work, so, which is Vimeo, which I love video. I love creators, and I love giving really awesome tools to the people. So I am biased. And I would say I'm probably going to reiterate what 99% of people would say, and that is, as it relates to Google, I wish they would open up results more to not just YouTube. I mean, it's just and again, this is where I'm not an apologist for Google, but sometimes I sound like one, simply just because after working in the industry for a while and working even with people like Google and some of their teams, I think that people are trying to do the right thing. And so that's a preface to say the reason why YouTube is returned the most, I have to think, is because that's how their algorithm works in general. Meaning YouTube is still way bigger than TikTok and any other type of service that has that type of medium, that type of content. So therefore, their algorithm wants to return a thing that it thinks most people want and are spending their time doing or at, the site they're at. And so the fact that you would return YouTube videos, whether or not they're the best or not, I think that is fitting to how their algorithm in general works today. So I'm not one of those people who thinks that somebody has gone in and just said, we're going to lean on YouTube and only YouTube. I think it's all algorithmic, if I can get it out of my mouth. With that being said, for creators out there, just for like, and for people who want choice and the fact that we need an open web, I would hope that at some point, and not with the nudging of some government, or some European law or whatever, that they would write and test a modification to the algorithm that would try to consider the quality of the video more so than the quality of the site. Because I know for sure that the user experience and the quality of videos many times are, I'll just say, I feel personally are better like on Vimeo and other sites like that than necessarily what I see being returned in Google search that are almost always YouTube videos. So I would love to see some type of quality update that would give other platforms an opportunity to return their videos. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah,
kind of
very interesting.
a little bit, but
yeah, I think it's good. And then to kind of close out, I'm gonna give like 2 rapid fire questions. The first one is, everybody likes tactics. Like, what is one tactic that you're kind of bullish on and implementing across some of your sites?
It's the disambiguation thing. That's the first one. Like, go to search for whatever, go to coywolf.pro and just look for disambiguation, the article on that. That is a bit of a mantra for me. I think that's one of the most effective and powerful things you can do to get your content to rank, is to approach it like that.
Cool. Yeah, I thought you were gonna say the emojis and URLs and titles.
Yeah, well, that's just more fun. I mean, emojis are fun. I mean, like, that's a whole other, we can spend time on that. That's the fact that there are things that you can do to bring more attention to your search snippets, and emojis is one of them. And so, I do things like I include the breadcrumb list schema, and I throw in emojis on the different levels within the breadcrumbs, and they show up in search and you notice them. So if you search for something where one of my sites are returned, and you're just looking at this, blue link, whatever, you're going to see a wolf emoji, and you're going to sometimes see a little light bulb emoji. And those are things that your eye naturally will gravitate towards. And so I see very little people take advantage of these things I've talked about and pointed out. And I wish they would, because I think they would be able to benefit from them.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of fun. And then lastly, I know we're at the wrap on time, but like most marketers and definitely SEOs, how many domains do you own?
It's got to be at least 100. Has to be. I own a lot, and I, double, triple, quadruple down on the whole Coywolf thing, and so I own a ton of Coywolf domains. All things that I think I might do. I didn't get them all, but all things that I might want to do one day. And then again, this could be a topic for another time. There is still value to .com. and so I worked at getting that. I was persistent with the owner of that for several years, and he eventually sold it to me, I guess like a year or so ago. It was not cheap. But there's value to .com. And I need it to do my business and things that I'm doing? No. But does that make the brand more valuable, especially if perhaps one day I might want to sell the whole thing? Yes, I think that if you have a .com on top of all the other things, all the other domains and the properties and stuff, that likely will significantly increase the value of that company and that brand.
Awesome. Well, John, I'm going to be conscious of your time. Definitely appreciate you taking time out of the day to speak with us. Everybody give John a shout out on Twitter. So thank you for spending time with us today. And John, do you have anything you wanted to share before we give everybody back their day?
I feel like I've shared enough. I appreciate everybody coming, and it's fun. It's great to talk with you. I haven't talked to you in a long time, so
that's been good.
It's been great.
Awesome. Well, have a good rest of your day, John, and everybody else. Take care. Bye.
Now, before we wrap this up, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more great content from the industry's best SEOs, content marketers, and content strategists. The ClearScope webinar series happens every week and helps SEO content creators of all skill levels advance their knowledge. Hope to see you. Tune in next time.